Well, as you know, there's a certain season coming up. Well, a certain holiday, to be more specific. And I just figured, I don't usually do too much for it. So this year I've done a couple things. I posted a Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode earlier, um, mostly just for the sake of, having it up there. It is actually one that managed to be fairly creepy, even though it's, still highly riffable. But one other thing I want to do this year is want to talk a little bit about horror movies, or more specifically, a few horror franchises. Now, this is probably going to be split up into threes. I'm going to be talking about one this video, one the next video, and one the video after that, and they will be recorded all at once, so don't worry, it's not going to be anything coming up that interrupts me and I don't get it done. Yeah, we've all been there. But, yeah, so, let's see, which one should I start with? Honestly, it'd probably be better if I start with the one that I'm a little bit more unfamiliar with, just because. Well, I wouldn't say that I'm completely unfamiliar with it. I've seen enough of it to know a lot of it, but I just, it's one of those things where I haven't seen every single movie in it yet. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. And that is Friday the 13th. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like Friday the 13th, okay? The origin was really good. The fact that it started out with Jason's mother, which is something a lot of people don't know, is actually very interesting. Um, Moves into Jason coming back from the dead in part two, which is pretty cool. Um, but it's just that later movies is where I really drew the line, and they're hard to find around here. So I haven't really tried to make any sort of great effort to find them. They're hard to find around here because very few stores seem to carry them. And as for online, well, it's places like Netflix and Hulu and whatnot don't really get them. So, except for the only two that I've seen ever streaming were Jason X and Jason Goes to Hell. Neither one of which I'm a fan of, and I have seen both of those. So, but to start out with, part one was good. It was pretty creepy revenge story. It was a fairly common practice for teenagers and young adults to be heading out to the woods to cabins and campsites and whatever, and throwing their little mini parties there, drugging, booze, and having sex. So this actually did manage to strike a chord with these guys. This film franchise did, especially in the early films. After a while, it became cliche, especially since doing that was actually a little less prevalent than it had used to be among the youth. People still did it, but it wasn't quite as prevalent as it had used to be. So it started kind of losing its edge as time went by, which is why they started moving it eventually. But the second movie, I think, was pretty good, pretty interesting too, having him come back from the dead and all. Um, Now, here's the thing, though. There was a lot of people seem to say the same thing about every franchise, which is pretty true. Is that the longer it goes on, the more stretched out it gets, and the more corny it gets, and to a degree, that's true. Um, Now, I don't really fully remember part three very well. I have to be honest. Because again, the only time I ever see these is on Friday the 13th marathons, which only happen on a Friday the 13th when I'm lucky enough to be able to watch them because there aren't kids around. Yeah, my sister's kids. Uh, wow. Let me put it this way: they're traumatized by frigging bunnies that have a creepy laugh in cartoons. So yeah. Um, but Oh, let's see here. Part 3, I don't quite remember too well. Part 4, I think, had a decent ending. Part 5, though, here's where I started getting kind of sick of the series. Now, Part 5 was weird as heck, okay? And I mean weird. Um, it's like suddenly suddenly, the killer's back, even although it's not Jason, and they're at this like I don't know, it's like a rehabilitation camp or something, or a camp for troubled youth or something like that. And oh my god, it's just weird. I mean, the first person to die in the movie, well, I don't know if he's the first or one of the first to die in the movie, isn't even killed by the killer. It's killed by one of the other kids who was then arrested and hauled off. It's like these kids are about as twisted as your killer is, so it's hard to really root for anyone per se. Um, the ending was just whack. It was one of the most stereotypical slasher film franchise endings at the time. Even the like B-list, lesser-known ones were starting to use it, and that's at the very end. He's crazy and he puts on the mask, and yeah. Anyways, but that's why part six was interesting to me. I don't. It's hard to say looking back whether or not part six was really that good, or whether or not it just seemed really good in comparison to the last one because I just watched it beforehand. But to me, I think it was pretty interesting. Um, the fact that what's really interesting too is how it completely ignores the last movie, pretends it didn't happen, and it seems every franchise had a movie in it that it tried to ignore and pretend didn't happen. Um, this one has it. The other two franchises I'm going to be talking about, they have it. It's pretty interesting. There's always that one black sheep in the family, so to speak, that no one wants to speak of. Well, it's also weird because it's like half of the people don't want to speak of it, and the other half are like insanely zealous about how underrated and unappreciated that one is, and whatever. But six to me is well, again, pretty interesting because he's plagued by the nightmares. He goes back to try to reassure himself that Jason Voorhees is in fact dead. Stabs the pole through his heart and everything, just to make doubly certain. Figures it's done, right? Well, no, freak lightning bolt and starts the heart back up again. Now, granted, it's kind of convoluted, and contrived way of bringing back, but I guess they said that it was originally intended to be an homage to like the old monster movies like Frankenstein, where the bolt of lightning brings it to life and everything. Which you can kind of get from that, and that is cool in a way. So it's forgivable, even if it is a bit contrived. Um, but it's just no wow. It was a pretty decent ending. The fact that they had him trapped in the bottom of the lake again, it seems like a good way to end it right there. To me, that is the ending. I can't watch past there because then I started watching the next movie, and it was getting weird as heck, man. I mean, girl with psychic powers or something like that somehow manages to, resurrect him. It was weird. It was weird. I didn't even get to see past the beginning, and already I was just bored as heck. And then after that, they got him moving away from Crystal Lake and into the city. Then you have where Jason goes to hell, where right off the bat they set a trap for him and they blow him apart, and then they take his body to the hospital, and friggin' doctor eats the heart. It's oh man. And it's weird too because like you never actually see Jason. It's all these people that are just supposedly possessed by his spirit as it wanders around. Weird stuff, man. It was just weird and awkward, and the story wasn't that well thought out, I don't think. Then you have this weird crossover with the Necronomicon there from the Evil Dead series, and then you have the in the very end, Freddy Krueger coming up. And I know that was leading up to some big crossover that actually wound up not happening for almost 10 years, but that in and of itself was a giant disappointment too. And I'm going to talk a little bit more on that when I cover something else later. And it just, oh my god, it was so just. I wasn't scared or in suspense at any point in that movie. I mean, at least a lot of the others managed to at least have Even if they weren't too terribly scary overall, have a few moments where at least it made you jump. That didn't even have that for me. I don't know. I just couldn't take it too seriously. And then you have Jason X, which the very premise of that movie makes absolutely no sense to me. Why they'd want his body? Why they? Oh, yeah, it was weird. That was a. If you thought the last movie jumped the shark, that one continued through the air. Okay, it just didn't come back down for a landing. But then they did a reboot, which was supposed to be the first. I think they said it was supposed to borrow from the first 3 or 4 films in the Friday the 13th library and kind of combine them into one. And they did an awesome job with that. I'm not gonna lie; it's the only one of the revamped or remade horror franchises that is remotely any good. I'm not gonna lie; it was very well done. They did change him up a little bit, but not too much from what he was. Um, the way that he found his mask and everything, that was just awesome. Though I did find that this is one case where I'm definitely going to advocate if you can get a hold of the regular version and not the uncut version, please do that. Because the uncut version, just there's so much stuff that they throw in there. Most of the stuff that's uncut is what, well, a lot of people buy the uncut versions for. But it just distracts from what's actually happening, and distracts from the plot, and distracts from the killings and everything. It just drags it out unnecessarily. It feels awkward. Um, it's just, yeah. But the actual film itself, when you get around all that, is definitely good. It's a good tribute. You could tell that the people who did it were being careful with it, that they were fans of the movies, and that really showed through. And well, that's it for this series. And the next series I'm going to cover, well, I'm going to let you take a guess as to what that is.